everyone, welcome to the webcast. My name is Sarah Cahill, and today I'm going to be talking to you about 10 steps to implementing Enterprise Data Management Cloud Service, or EDMCS. Alright, so just a little about NRL. Just a quick disclaimer before we get started here. These are my own opinions. Nothing has been peer-reviewed and shouldn't be taken as an official stance from Oracle. And please don't replicate anything you see here without asking for permission from NRL first. Okay, so here's just a little about NRL. Last year at Open World, NRL actually won the Global Oracle Excellence Award for BI and EPM Cloud Partner of the Year. And this one's cool because it's the first of its kind awarded for a cloud partner. We were also awarded the Oracle Excellence Award for the North America EPM Cloud Solution Partner of the Year. And then you can see on this slide we have lots of other cool facts about us. Alright, so I'll start with a brief overview of what EDMCS really is. It's really the central place to manage your master data, so your dimensions, hierarchies, data maps, artifacts, and whatnot. You can take and synchronize that data across multiple different systems. So what's cool about EDM recently is it initially targeted a much smaller kind of power user-based group. However, it's taken a turn and it's really now targeting to support millions of users. They're really gunning for this zero-touch application approach. There are audit trails, so you know exactly who did what. There's also a set of validations that occur, so just to ensure that accuracy of your metadata. You can compare different hierarchies side by side and then easily update them. It's a drag and drop then submit process. There's different ways to manage your master data across your different sources and targets. Users can be subscribed to a viewpoint, so if an update is made, they'll be sent a notification, get a subscription, and then we'll get into more details about that later. That's a pretty cool feature. There's also something called node type converters that will help a source kind of talk to their target correctly. And last but not least, they have added in approvals back in February. So we're going to get into a good deal of this in greater detail, but that's kind of your brief overview. All right, so the big point of EDMCS is to be the central point for data. And when I'm saying data right now, I'm doing the little quote sign with my fingers because in EDMCS world, this really means all dimensions, hierarchies, properties, values, mappings, you name it. It's really aimed, like I said, towards the business user, so no longer just targeting those power users or admins. You can change a hierarchy set from active to archived to keep old hierarchy versions if you want. If you're concerned about letting business users run your master data, you can rest assured there is an audit trail, as well as validation rules and granular security and all that fun stuff. So as you can see here, there are multiple connections supported. You have PBCS, ePBCS, OAC, S-based cubes, PCMCS, FCCS, and custom applications which weren't listed yet, but we'll get into those later. All right, so some key EDM cloud features. This really is the next generation DRM. It has that modern graphical interface with the big cards or icons that you can click on around to navigate around. There's lots of jump buttons, is what I like to call them, to go between artifacts that are related to each other, and they're super, super helpful. You can request a driven batch of changes. You can compare hierarchies or lists of nodes, then visualize those changes before actually doing them. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, there are validation rules to assist with this. So it's mainly your drag and drop features where the end business users are going to live. Security can go down to a pretty granular selection for what people do and don't have access to or can and can't change. It's very easy to push hierarchies to EPM Cloud apps and then other apps, and then this is all done with exports. Then there's also mappings that can be pushed into data management. All right, so let's get to the point of this presentation. What are the 10 steps to implement EDMCS? So here's a quick overview slide, but we will get into these in greater detail in the next slides. For starters, you will absolutely want to train the user base. Again, the product is looking for more than just power users, so training is going to be a big deal. There's definitely going to be some setup, as always, bringing in the apps, setting up security, etc. And then we'll get into all of these in greater detail. So let's keep the ball rolling. All right, so what's the number one thing you need to do? Train. Well, this isn't necessarily step number one. It is important. So we put it here. This one's a little bit of a no-brainer. You definitely want to train at least a core team of users in EDMCS. Though it is pretty user-friendly, there are concepts and actions that they need to know how to do. So, however you want to handle this, train the trainer or whatnot, that's up to you, but it's definitely a step that shouldn't be missed. All right, setting up source and target access. All right, so we recommend having an IT person work with an infra consultant to set up your EDMCS instance. You'll likely have additional concerns such as firewalls, SSO, setup of the system admins, and the faster you can provide access requirements to IT, the quicker they can set up your instance. If you're connecting to other products such as PBCS or OAC, you might need service accounts as well as security setup before you can do anything. So you just don't want to delay any of that. All right, here is a big tip. If you haven't paid attention yet, pay attention now. Take a blank backup first. I know you all probably get everything right on your first try, but but if you're like me and you don't get everything correct on the first time, you will really thank yourself for having this backup. And then obviously provisioning your core team. All right, next up, gather requirements, figure out our design, and prototype it all out. So you do want to consider the condition that your data is in. Is it even possible, at this point in time to sync up every single environment? You might want to consider doing things incrementally. Your workflow process is going to decipher a lot of how you set everything up. You're going to want your key stakeholders to be involved, to be aware and actively, involved in what's going on. And you're going to want to know all of your sources and targets that you plan to bring into EDMCS. Your sources will be in file format, so just keep that in mind. And you're certainly going to want to know which data elements that your targets need to be getting from EDMCS. Okay, so some examples of dimensions that you might want to manage within EDMCS are entity, any entity-related attributes, maybe a department dimension, account dimension is a huge one, employee, another big one, job code. Really, these are likely your bigger dimensions that change frequently. So what dimensions should you possibly not bring into EDMCS? All right, well, dimensions that are static. For ones that are static, I'm actually going to recommend that you don't bring those in. I know those of you from the DRM stages, that's kind of the way you might be used to, but it's the reason why is because there's not much value added because these dimensions don't change much, but pricing, is by node, so it's not much value, but you're paying a higher cost to have them in there. Now, if you have dimensions that change a lot or you have audit requirements, go ahead and add those, but otherwise I would just leave them out. All right, in this example, you can see your sources would be your ERP GL Fusion and HCM source data going into EDMCS and then flowing through to your target apps. So in this example, we have OAC and PBBCS. All right, so you need to ask yourself, how many cubes are there that you're bringing in? How many applications? What about attribute dimensions? And currently, attribute dimensions don't come in as kind of true attribute dimensions, and it is a bit of a manual process. So it is a consideration if you're trying to implement EDMCS tomorrow. However, it is on the roadmap to have support for, kind of a more true attribute dimension in the future. All right, you need to know who the user base is and what type of security they need access to. You'll want to analyze each dimension. What's the hierarchy like and the member count? What properties are all needed for each of those? What are the default properties? Who are the users? And again, what type of security access do they need? So some more questions on dimensions. Maintenance, frequency, timing, who is doing what, identifying sources, and what's the detail around all of that. You'll want to check out a copy of the import file format for your sources and see if it's actually compatible or if it needs some manipulation. And then you'll want to know what are your targets and what nodes need to be brought over to EDMCS. What about properties and frequency? These are all questions you need to be asking. Okay, what about mappings? Should any of those be maintained in EDMCS? You'll need to know everything about your sources and target apps because each source and target is going to have its own set of requirements. Can you utilize built-in hooks to other apps? What are the jobs that need to be run? What's the file layout like, and are all columns needed? What are those required nodes? Do you need a master application? Can you have a single source master viewpoint, then subscribe other viewpoints to it, so you only have to make changes once? You can even decide to auto-submit for your changes or not. With auto-submit, the changes are automatically submitted to the target applications, which really eliminates maintenance because it doesn't involve someone else having to come in and submit. And so we'll go into that in a little more detail in another slide. But if you don't want to do the auto-submit, you could do what's called a request assignee. And either way, there's a request assignee, and then that request assignee would get an email and then go in and submit. So it all just decides on how you want to handle subscriptions. All right, so do you need any node type converter mappings? How much approval is needed? Where and for what? All right, here's a more interactive design example than shown before. We can see that there's an EDM app for each of the corresponding target OAC, PBCS, ERP, and HCM applications. It looks like the PBCS finance app in EDM, so the one in the upper right with the yellow background is sort of the master application in EDM. And then it's feeding those changes. They're getting pushed to the other EDM applications for a particular set of dimensions depending on the EDM application. Those changes are then, looks like, pushed back to the target OAC, PBCS, ERP, and HCM applications. It also looks like in the bottom right-hand corner that the target HCM application also feeds a source to the HCM application in EDM as well. for some business purpose reason. All right, so you can have a single EDM application source, a single target cube. This approach does allow each of your cubes to be more distinct and manage its own properties. However, the cumbersome part is the maintenance. So for example, adding a new entity in 6 places. And you do that by comparing to other cubes and dragging and dropping, so it's fairly user-friendly, but you have to do it 6 different times. With subscriptions, you can have target viewpoints, subscribe to viewpoints in a dedicated source master application. Change requests are then created for all views. So this means you only have to make changes in one place. So that's nice. And then, as I discussed a little earlier, if auto submit is turned on, then once you commit in the master, those changes will be automatically committed in the subscribed views. And then again, there's also the option to set up for, in addition, there's also the option to set up for approvals prior to auto committing if you would like that. All right, so you'll want to think about your workflow process and policies. For example, your approval process for updating a node. Who would approve adding an entire node dimension, and is what you need even compatible with EDMCS? You're going to want to know what viewpoint you need for maintenance purposes. Here's another big tip. It is not easy to delete objects. Views and viewpoints, you can't even delete at all. So think long and hard before adding them. However, you can archive them, but then, you still probably don't want to get this long, massive list. You really need to know your facts and what your target app can do, can and can't do. An example right now is hierarchical attributes aren't supported. Only lists are supported at this time. All right, another action you'll want to take is to prototype everything out, but do it in incremental steps. This helps avoid massive redos. Okay, you'll definitely want to keep your SMEs involved because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to inherit everything. They're also going to be your key sources to making sure you are building everything correctly. So definitely show them prototypes. You don't want to build an entire structure that doesn't work for them and then possibly have to start all the way over. All right, next we're going to register our application. So you've heard me say the words source and target a few times at this point. That's really what makes up an EDM application. A source and a target equals a single EDMCS application. So there's really kind of 2 types. There's the custom type, and then EPBCS, PBCS, FCGL. The custom apps follow a different type setup than the others, which we'll go into a little more. So here's what the applications screen looks like. Very simple. You can click on the applications card and then you click the register button in order to register an application. So your first step is to choose the application type. These are what we discussed on a previous slide. All right, so here's the different steps between a custom app and an EPBCS app, which is very similar to the PBCS and FCGL setup. For a custom app, you would first create the custom application, then you'd add the dimensions, add the node types, define properties for node types, define import and export settings, complete custom application registration. And then for the EPBCS app, you have a similar process, but you have some benefits because when you import those dimension files from the EPBCS application, it's going to build in those properties for you. All right, after registering, you'll add in node types for the dimensions. So these contain a collection of nodes similar in properties. Then you'll set up the properties for the node type. Name is going to come in by default, but you're likely going to want to set up some other common ones, such as alias or description. So while setting up properties, you should consider the following. So which ones can be shared across other EDM applications? What's the type of property you're creating? If you're considering a master application, what type of properties can other applications' viewpoints prescribe to? Consider headings and constraints, and also if the property needs a default value. All right, so this is what the screen looks like when you're adding a new property for a node type. You're going to select a property template which contains the type of data the property has. You'll give the property a name and an optional description and level, which would be either node or relationship. So there are some predefined properties you could select from versus having to create your own as shown on kind of previous slides. Just press the select button and then you can see the list of options. All right, once you've added in all of your property types, you're going to be taken back to the node type screen to review. Make sure you hit next through the entire registration or nothing is going to be saved. Do not mess this up. If you X out, nothing's going to be saved, so make sure to hit next through that entire process. So once your app is fully registered, you'll see it within the applications card along with other registered applications that have already been registered previously. All right, next step, define user interfaces, which is mainly going to be the views and viewpoints for the end users. All right, so upon application creation, there is a default view that is created, and it's marked below in the description. Views contain viewpoints, which are where the users are going to live and make their changes. All right, inspecting the view will bring you to the nodes in the view. From here you can inspect the view, compare nodes in the view to nodes in another view. You can validate the view to ensure compliance. You can copy the view. You can download the view to examine or work offline. To summarize this slide, to create a view within a hierarchy subset, you're pretty much in a summary matter, first going to create the view and viewpoint, selecting the application and dimension, then whatever the main node set is. Then create a node set for the sub-hierarchy, assigning the main hierarchy to it. You're going to add a new viewpoint within the other viewpoint. Then you're going to open the view and create a request to insert it. All right, to create a new view from the views icon, simply just select the create button. So you can see these are the easy to navigate icons. I click on view and then I click create. It's pretty straightforward. Okay, so here's a quick demo on adding a viewpoint to a view. So I'm going to go ahead and play this. So here we are, we're going to click create. Pick the application dimension. All right, and we're going to have to give it a name. The description's optional, but definitely recommended. All right, then we're going to click create. All right, and notice you can't edit it right now. And also in the upper left-hand corner that it's in draft. That's because we hadn't set a node set. Once we save, now it's taken out of draft mode. And you can click definition, see the viewpoints. All right, so that's it for the demo. Let's go to our next one. All right, 6A, define node type converters. So node type converters are set in the target node types, and they allow them to recognize node types from other viewpoints. So setting them up really allows for drag and drop maintenance between the two viewpoints for subscriptions to another viewpoint. To set up node type converters, again, you're going to go to the target node type. So for example, copy nodes from GL application to EDMCS application. Therefore, we want to set up a node type converter in the account node type for the corporate planning or EDMCS application. All right, so once you are in the target node type, you're going to first select the source node type. And then once you've selected that source node type, which here's account for the corporate GL, the properties are going to auto-populate to the right and attempt to do their best to map. But you may have to update manually. All right, 6B, define subscriptions. So I talked about subscriptions a little earlier in the presentation, but they really are powerful. This is how you subscribe several apps to a single or master app viewpoint and make changes, in a single spot. So to recap, you can auto-submit those changes and not have to have anyone interfere with the process, or you can have the request assignee have to go in and submit the changes. Either way, the request assignee will get a notification if the changes are made in a master app's viewpoint. Also with the auto submit, remember you can decide to have approvals with that as well. All right, so the steps are decide your source and target apps you want to have subscribe. The easiest way is to set a separate view. This way the viewpoints are all in one place. You'll have to set up node type converters in the target node type. Then you can set up your descriptions, defining the request assignee as well as auto submit or manual. All right, so we're going to go through the screens on an example for subscriptions. And our example will be a master view, then adding the entity viewpoints for the target applications that we want subscribed to the master. To edit a view, click the Actions menu or the ellipses, then Inspect. You'll then go to the Definitions tab and click Create to create the viewpoint. Then you're going to select the entity dimension for the application, which is the general ledger in this example. All right, you're then going to have to go to the new master view we have created, inspect the entity GL, and edit the subscriptions tab. So at this point, we're ready to subscribe. Simply click Create, then you select the viewpoint you want to subscribe to, which is master entity in this example. You'll have to assign a request assignee and whether or not to auto submit. You'll save, then repeat the same process for any other viewpoints you want to subscribe to the master viewpoint. All right, next up you'll want to import nodes. So here are two sample files. The import brings in the nodes along with their properties. Unless you have a list type dimension, the import file is also going to include the parent-child relationships. Okay, so to import data, go to the Applications card and select the ellipses icon next to the application that you want to import data to, and then select Import. So the file should be in .csv format and must contain a name and parent column. Name and parent column. If it's a hierarchy file, the parent node must come before the child node. So Here we can see that TD was created before it became parent to child 100. If it's a list format, then the parent column will be omitted or blank. And the columns can be in any order that you want them to be. So here's what the import screen looks like. You'll basically set the input source to file, then select the file, then click import. Pretty simple. When importing nodes, there are a few things to consider. The columns must match the order of the properties in the dimensions node type. You'll want to examine the nodes for redundant pieces to the target application. And do your best to come up with a common naming convention where possible. Remember, nodes are costly. So the example here is Department A, but then another section calls it Dept A. Just consider, explore the possibility of, common naming convention. All right, security and workflow. Okay, so the users get predefined roles from Oracle Cloud Identity Domain. User security is really set up and configured in EDM. They can be assigned to groups, which I'd recommend if you can swing it versus doing security for each individual person. You'll need to secure your applications, views, and then data within those views. So the roles are defined within the application. Permissions can be assigned at the application and view levels. However, this is supposed to be changing with upcoming releases, going down to the node level. EDMCS has collaborative workflow where you can enhance your subscriptions by adding policies to the notifications and approvals. So should you decide to set these up, you can determine which users and or groups need to approve and can be set up in parallel or in series. So an example is one group needing to approve a new department because they need special setup. That has to be done before payroll charge combinations, and then that all has to get done before any of the segments have opened. All right, on to number 9, automate. So there are currently some automation challenges. For one, there has to be a manual process in place for EDMCS exports because only an admin can initiate them. Currently, the output is by application and dimension. At this time, there are no derived properties or a way to export only a piece of a dimension. If you need to extract some substring from a name, there's really no way to do that. However, there is a product out there. It's called OneCloud, and we definitely recommend that. It's going to help with the ease with all the automation pains that might rise up. All right, so OneCloud has features like file splitting and date check that EDMCS just doesn't have. It's also very user-friendly. It uses REST APIs to communicate. So if you want automation without, some of the manual steps you might need, we recommend using OneCloud. All right, last one, migrate and deploy. So to migrate an application, simply go to the migration card, check mark what you want to migrate, then export. The exports will be on the snapshot screen when they're done. One thing to consider is that as of right now, EDM is going to migrate everything. You can't just pick a particular artifact that you want to migrate. So be very careful when migrating to dev or prod because it's an all or nothing, at least as of right now. So the last piece is to deploy and train end users on application design, EDMCS fundamentals that they just need to know, and creating requests, which is what we see in this screenshot. So you can see, the nodes in the middle, and then on the right, the different properties. On the left, you can see the different changes. A request is really the mechanism to work with enterprise data. It allows for the review of changes before they are committed. The type of change actions that you can do, you can add a node, you can insert a node, you can move, remove, reorder, delete a node, copy, update a property. So those are the changes that can be done. All right, so in conclusion, again, you'll want to train your users. You'll want to go through all your setup. You'll want to go through requirements, design, and prototype. Create the EDM application or applications. Define the user interfaces, so that's your views and viewpoints. Define node type converters and subscriptions. Import dimensions and properties. Set up your security and workflow. Set up your automation, and then migration and deployment. All right, continuing education. So if you guys haven't checked these out before, they're really cool. We have a lot of them out there, some with thousands of views. Interrail has Play It Forward videos out there on YouTube. So they're very helpful. They cover a wide variety of topics, so I just definitely recommend checking those out. We do have some on EDMCS as well. Interrail also has the best-selling Hyperion technical book series out there. So if you're looking to learn about, one of these other products, we might, maybe have one on EDMCS in the future. We'll see. But definitely check these out. All right, so that is what I had for you guys today. Thank you so much for attending. I hope you learned something.